So Dave Chappelle, I don't know if you guys watched his stand-up specials that premiered on New Year's Eve on Netflix. There were two of them. One was a big theater show. One was a more intimate show at the Belly Room, which is like this storied stand-up venue. It's very intimate in Los Angeles. And he did 2 hours of comedy. And there are parts that are at the very least controversial. We're gonna see how we feel about them. He touched on a lot of stuff. One of the things he touched on was Kevin Spacey and Anthony Rapp. Kevin Spacey got into a lot of trouble and lost a big movie role because of a story about how he molested or came on to Anthony Rapp, who's a comedian. The joke told by Dave Chappelle was, he's like, he can't believe that the Rapp grew up to be gay anyway, and that Kevin Spacey, even though he was 14, Rapp was 14, Kevin Spacey sniffed that out like a truffle pig. And then he said, I've been to a lot of parties in my day. I've never been to a good one that had 14-year-old boys in it. And then he said, all joking aside, Kevin Spacey shouldn't have done that to that shit to that kid. He was 14 years old and forced to carry a grown man's secret for 30 years. And then his button was, the saddest part is, if he'd been able to carry that secret another 6 months, I would get to know how House of Cards ends. So those are the jokes. That's one joke. Let's start there. What did you think about that joke in particular? Did that, touch you guys the wrong way, so to speak?
So as you guys can see, we're all like, all right, you go.
Fuck it.
Go.
I'll start. It's funny to me.
Yeah.
Because he's taking a chance to be like, I'm going to point out the funny stuff. I'm gonna do it, and there's two kinds of funny jokes that he has there. One is just like Kevin Spacey. It's kind of calling him an inborn predator to be able to sniff out like the gay kid at the party when he's 14. So that's not punching down. The second thing that he says is, I've never been to a good party with 14-year-old boys in it. He's punching Kevin Spacey. Like, what kind of freaking party are you going to that you're like inviting 14-year-old boys to? That's weird.
And also his tag to that joke is as well, even when I was 13, I've never been to a good party where there were 14-year-olds.
The thing that people, I think, that were offended with, well, to answer your question, Brett, was not offended by anything that Dave Chappelle said. And believe it or not, I didn't watch the Chappelle show. So this was like my first,
You're the one.
I hadn't heard about it because I didn't have cable back in the day. This is my first really big foray into Dave Chappelle, which just off top, he's brilliant. I think, Grace, you say that nothing's off limits in comedy, right? So when I watched that, or some jokes are, I think that's what the way you said nothing's off limits.
No, I fully think that you should be able to joke about anything. It's a bastion of free speech, comedy is, but we also should be able to criticize it. But that's neither here nor there.
But so I thought about that as I was watching it, and I think that for him to make jokes about these sort of things, we've all been talking about this for the last 6 months. These sexual assault, sexual misconduct. So that's on the conversation of the people right now. So for Dave Chappelle to make jokes about it, and then also like I said, he has this uncanny knack of making a joke, but also educating you within on the way to the punchline. I thought was brilliant. I could totally see why people are upset and they do feel offended, because there are some things that some people you just don't talk about. But for me personally, to answer your question, Brett, was not offended in the least.
I also think that the people that were offended heard that one joke and then turned it off.
I don't think they watched it.
Exactly, yeah.
I don't think these people watched it.
Yeah, they either didn't watch it and just read the jokes online, or they just watched that one joke on the special and said bye.
Yeah.
And I think that if you did that, then sure, like maybe you'd be offended. But if you didn't hear the full context and you didn't hear how that segued into other things that he was discussing in the show, then you kind of did yourself a
huge
disfavor.
Right.
Yeah. So these were two of the 4 Netflix specials from Dave Chappelle's deal with Netflix. And the first 2, I have to say, I was pretty underwhelmed by them. I know that they were taped significantly earlier than when they were released. So a lot of the jokes felt really old and tired, and we talked about that when we talked about it here. And then the other thing that I felt about these 2 specials in particular was that they were more intentional and more sort of thought out. And even though I disagreed with a lot of the things he said, I felt that he really made a point to carve out his own argument and be like, this is my perspective, and it's so important that we have comedy to speak recklessly. And he would say something and be like, I think I'm probably wrong about this. And it was sort of like self-effacing, and it was self-aware in a way that I didn't feel like he was. And I thought that he had some really brilliant material. I really enjoyed them, but I also don't want to invalidate people that were offended, because a big thing that he says is it's all funny until it happens to you. So that's a big thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, so here's another thing that he said. He talked about the Louis C.K. issue, and he talked about 2 specific instances from that. One was he said like Louis, and I'm not gonna read the quote, I don't think. Well, maybe I will. He goes, Louis C.K., this woman got upset because Louis C.K. jizzed on his own stomach. And she says like, and he says like, she said that ruined her comedy dream, and that if that is what ruins your comedy dream, you've got a quote brittle ass spirit. He's like, he said like, what if Martin Luther King, like you're not gonna be able to make it in show business. What if Martin Luther King was like, I had a dream, but then this guy jizzed on his stomach, so I'm not gonna fight for black rights. Like that is a specific perspective that people then went after, and then there were some other things that he said. But what are your thoughts on that specific line of jokes?
He was basically saying like you got to have a thicker skin. You got to have a thinner, of more stronger backbone, I guess. So when I heard a lot of these jokes, you guys, I thought even now in 2018, with everything that has transpired, we have a responsibility to be more responsible with our tongue. We can't be as slick with our tongue as we would. But when we're talking off camera, you said his jokes, Dave Chappelle was of 2004. A lot of stuff he did back then will not fly now. I think that's just the evolution of where we've come as a society. In regards to that joke, I do think that yes, I could see how it would be insensitive for someone who has been. We can't say what's going to traumatize one person to the next.
Right.
So for Dave Chappelle to take such a strong stance on that, yeah, it was a little like made my teeth itch a little bit, especially when it comes to like Louis C.K. and jizzing on. It was just really out of pocket. However, it was funny.
Yeah. I also think his strongest material from this show for me, where he really, I think it was really thoughtful. I disagreed with some of it, was where he was talking about targeting the system and how there's a system that is in place, and and talking about there are going to be some, what do you say, like shitty allies, and just accepting shitty allyship. I thought was a really interesting point of view, and accepting that people are going to, I think it's flawed allies maybe, and just accepting that you're going to have people that want to support you that have also fucked up, and how do you reconcile that? It was at once a comedy special, but it was also just Dave Chappelle's sort of, his TED Talk on what he thinks of the shape of the world. And I think that having his perspective out there is important. And I think it's also so important that we have a healthy, robust criticism of it as well. It's how we grow, having these conversations.
We're at a point, I think, where, in jokes, and he does this with his Anthony Rapp joke, where he says, there is something, joke, and then he says, but seriously though, you shouldn't have to carry around a man's secret for 30 years like this. He does the but seriously though, and I think in the large discussion that we're having, in the times we're in, we did the jokey thing, and then right now with the Me Too movement, we're at the but seriously though moment. And I think there are people who, I don't know, there's one quote, I really wanna read it. We're gonna go way over with this, but I don't think we need to. I think we can get it elsewhere. Let's go to this tweet from this guy, Owen Ellickson. He's a writer, he's rooting for The Office. He says, it is with regret that I sentenced Dave Chappelle to the Satellite, the space station comedy club comprised solely of comedians who drowned in their own minds. And he says that he thinks that Chappelle has drowned in his own mind the way that he thinks that Jerry Seinfeld, Eddie Murphy, they've all drowned in their own minds. They did all this observational comedy that was great and fantastic at their time. They got super rich, they got super detached, and now what they observe around them is nothing like what everyone else observes. And so when they make these jokes, it's from kind of this place of insulated privilege where they're able to just be like, here's my take on what you went through. Here, Louis C.K. jizzed on his stomach in front of you. From my perspective, you should have thicker skin. Now, the way he set up that premise was like, he just jizzed on his stomach. No, he didn't just jizz on his stomach. He whipped his junk out in front of multiple people. He had this weird situation where there was a producer, and like the jizzing on the stomach, some people were like, she should have just left. But the ones where it's like, there is a producer handling the talent and he asked to masturbate in front of her. That is a very difficult situation to go through. And he made her go through that. And while Dave Chappelle is like, you should have thick skin, the Me Too movement is also like, well, wouldn't it be great if people didn't do that to women in the workplace? Now, the sad thing is, the interesting thing is for me, like, where does comedy come in? And Dave Chappelle is at this point where he says, here's where comedy comes in, it's my specials. where I get to kind of open the door, step in, give you a very specific setup that I have crafted over a year of trying this out in front of people. When Owen said that everyone's isolated, those guys are isolated, but they're not. He's been doing this stuff in comedy clubs. And in comedy clubs, there is a kind of laugh that it's a laugh. You get people to laugh when they actually find you funny, right? They, haha, that's an involuntary action. What we see on the internet with a lot of the screeds that people are putting out is this. You know, in a comedy club, when people clap at you, they're doing this because they want to give you positive reinforcement, but it's not an inherent activity that's happening. This is absolutely voluntary. And when you watch, for the most part, like Bill Maher, and when you watch, for the most part, who Bill Maher was listed among the people who drowned in their own minds in Owen's next tweet, but then you see other folks like Stephen Colbert, there's a lot of this shit. And where I find Chappelle lives is finding that part, that ticklish part of your psyche in a world where you're like, this is the right way to be, and this is my coherent strategy when it comes to like people's ethos and how the world should be. He just finds the way to set it up where he hits you and you're like, you son of a bitch, you made me laugh. And I think that's what this special is. I think there's a lot that we should allow him to say, and this is the way we should allow him to say it, and he himself invites dialogue. And watch the whole specials, it's awesome.